Hello everyone and welcome back. I'm Diane Deziel and today I'm showing you how to develop sleeve. I'm going to show you two styles, one sleeve with gathers at the top and one sleeve with the gathers at the bottom, and I will show you how to develop them using two different methods. First of all, today I'm going to be using my kids block size 4. But you must know that the technique I'm showing would be the same thing for adult. Doesn't matter the size of your pattern. If you remember, this block had the seam allowance included and it's perfect for what we have to do today. But first, since I'm doing short sleeve and I'll do a few patterns with you, I decided to do the block for a short sleeve. So I trace it exactly the same as my long sleeve. And the length at the underarm I cut at 5 centimeters. Then since I'm doing two techniques, one of them will be the slashing method. I also trace on paper this time two more little sleeves exactly the same. The first method that I'm going to show you is the slashing method. It's not the method that I use. I'd rather do the pivoting method. It's less work and it's clean right away. But this method, the slashing one, is more obvious. So using the two color paper, you will see exactly what we had to the pattern. Now the first thing I'm going to do is on my basic pattern, I'm going to trace parallel line parallel to the grain line. Here I have a very small sleeve, so I'm going to do them at 2 centimeter distance between the line. And I'm going to trace on each side. The last one should not be further than the armhole notch. Here you could see I have my grain line, and 2 centimeter distance give me 3 lines on each side. And also you could see that I did trace my seam line at the bottom and on top of the sleeve. Now the first style that I'm showing you is going to be to do gathers on the sleeve head. So the next step will be to cut on these lines, all of them, from the top to the bottom, and make sure that you stop your line exactly at the seam line at the bottom. Once all your slash are done, you're going to do little more slash at the bottom, diagonal, towards the intersection of the seam line with the cutting line that we did, and keeping 1 or 2 millimeters to hold the piece together. So you cut just like that on all of them. Now on your paper, you're going to start by tracing a grain line. Now the next thing we'll do is to decide how much gathers we want. I would say that the minimum would be 1.5 times the measurement. So if you have 2 centimeters, you would put 1 centimeter opening. But these are very small gathers. If you want like basic or normal gathers, you would double the measurement. So for each stripe, 2 centimeters, you would have 2 centimeter distance or opening. You could even go bigger than that, more gathers, if your fabric is thin enough. So the measurement I'm using today will be 2 centimeters, and we will start the first opening right at the grain line. So remember, this was my grain line. I did the little arrow. So my grain line right on at the bottom, and you're going to put half the measurement that we need for opening on each side of the grain line. So 1 and 1. So I will measure to be accurate and glue them in position. Now we're ready for the second opening. You could do one side or the other, same thing. So you're opening your 2 centimeters. And here you should notice that the little slit that we did at the bottom is going to allow your pattern to stay flat on the table. So when it's in the good position, you could just glue it in position. Then we do the next one, again 2 centimeters. Then we do the last opening. And here I hope you notice that I do measure my opening at the seam line. When it's good, you just glue it in position. Then I will repeat exactly the same thing for the other side. Now your little puff or gathered sleeve is finished. We would just have to connect the first part going towards the top. It's okay to go like a 5 millimeter higher at the sleeve head, and then continue until the last side or the last piece on the other side has to be a nice continuous line. Finally, at the sleeve head, you remember that this was the grain line and the notch was a little bit towards the front. So you have to positionate your notch at the same distance from the new grain line. So you could use your block and just report your top notch or shoulder notch. Now, like I said, this is the little basic gathered sleeve, but it doesn't have no puffy on top of the sleeve head. If you want to do the puff at the sleeve head, using exactly the same development, we would need to add measurement to the sleeve head and retrace the line. For today's example, I'm going to add a 4 centimeter. That means about 2 centimeter puffiness at the sleeve head, because everything that goes up comes back down. So by adding 4, I get about 2 centimeter going up on top. Now from that point, I'm just going to retrace my sleeve head from this point to the left side and from this point to the right side. Then for the notch, I'll do just the same thing. So using my block, I'm going to retrace my notch. Now, if you're wondering, should I add seam allowance somewhere? The answer is no. Seam allowance were included, so they're still included everywhere. Now, maybe you're wondering, what can I do to hem my sleeve? Because it's shaped now and you cannot just fold or add a 4 centimeter hem. The basic solution would be to do a facing for your hem. And since it's a small sleeve, this one a size 4 for kids, I would trace a facing of maybe 3 centimeter parallel to my seam line, all the way parallel. And of course, before placing a second piece of paper under to be able to have my facing, I would add a notch, a sewing notch, right on the grain line. That one for both facing and sleeve. Now, as you could see, I traced my facing line. I cut them together. So for sure, they're exactly the same and they will fit perfectly. I also report my grain line. And now I just have to cut it. Now your first gathered sleeve is done. Remember that these are 2 options, or with the puff or without the puff on the sleeve head. We're now ready for the second style. Now for this second style, I'm going to ask you to retrace the exact same line that we did for the first gathered sleeve. So 3 lines parallel to the grain line at 2 centimeter distance, 3 on the front, 3 on the back side. Now the measurement here, the 2 centimeter, remember it doesn't have to be 2 centimeter. You could decide to make it 3 centimeter and it would be no problem. The amount of line, just remember that you should not go over the notch, the armhole notch on back and front. So if it end up to be 5 lines on each side, it's okay, no problem. Just like we did for the first one, here again, we're going to start by tracing the grain line on another paper. Then just for you to see that we're doing exactly the same thing using a different technique, I'm also going to use the same measurement. So I'll do the opening of 2 centimeter just like for the first sleeve, but this time I will do it at the bottom. Just to get a different style of sleeve, this time I will have my gathers at the bottom of the sleeve. Now for this one that I'm doing by pivoting method, I'm going to start by just marking the bottom and the top of my sleeve on the grain line. And I'm going to start with the left side, just like I did for the other development. So now I'm opening at the bottom. I want to open on the middle line, 1 centimeter on each side. So I could mark my 1 centimeter on each side of the grain line. Now for the pivoting, you're going to take your pattern awl and you're going to hold your pattern on the paper at the grain line, at the seam line. So just like that. And since I'm starting with the back side, I'm going to pivot my pattern until my 1 centimeter reference at the bottom, just like that. Then hold your pattern and just trace the top part until the next line and the bottom until the next line also. All the other opening will be 2 centimeter. So for this one, I'm going to measure from there 2 centimeter and just put a reference. Then you're going to hold with the pattern awl on the seam line, exactly on that line. See, I trace until that line, so I'm going to hold the pivot right there. Then you pivot your sleeve to do the opening of 2 centimeter until my line is aligned with my 2 centimeter reference at the bottom. Then you hold it there and you're going to trace from where you finish until the next line. Same thing at the bottom, from this to the next line. Now I'm going to measure again from where I finished tracing 2 centimeter. Then I'm going to hold it where I finished tracing on top, hold it at the seam line and pivot the pattern. Then you hold it in position and trace from where you left until the last line. Same thing at the bottom, from the opening to the last line. Then you're going to measure your last 2 centimeter to add. Then do the same thing one more time. So hold it at the seam line, pivot, and then trace from where you left on top all around to the last opening at the bottom. Now I'm going to do the same thing for the other side. Now you could see that already my pattern is much more clean. That's why I usually do the pivoting method, less work and much more clean. Now just like for the other one, we're going to report the middle notch or the shoulder notch onto the pattern using the basic block. Then for this one, if you just want gather at the bottom, no puffiness or blousing at the bottom, you could just connect the dot. It's even much easier than the first one. Usually we don't put gathers completely at the underarm, so you could even place notch at 2 or 3 centimeters from each side. Then the gathers will start and end at the notch. For this style, if you want to do the blousing at the bottom, we'll use exactly the same measurement that we did on the sleeve head for the puffiness. So 4 centimeters added to the bottom of the sleeve. Now to retrace my bottom line with the puff at the bottom, if I don't want just the sleeve to be longer, I would start the new line exactly at the notch. So the short part will hold the sleeve at the right length. Now, I don't know if you could see, but I did start with a curve, a tiny little curve towards the top. And then I did go towards the bottom for the bottom part. This is giving me like a stretch S shape. So I will have a nice continuous line. Now for the bottom of this sleeve, it's nice to do the little gathers. But how are you going to hem it? I suggest you do a little cuff at the bottom. And for the measurement of the cuff, go back to your sleeve. It's going to be exactly the measurement of the bottom of your sleeve. The width of the cuff, the basic width would be about 4 centimeters. But since it's double, you make it 8 centimeters plus seam allowance, so it gets to 10 centimeters. Here you go, you did your 2 sleeve pattern, and remember these are just different styles, so 2 options with the puff at the bottom or not. So in fact you did 4 sleeve pattern. That's it for today. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next time.